the question of poetry today.
Sure.
And you have spoken in metaphors. Well, who doesn't? The Bible speaks in metaphors.
Yeah.
As Boccaccio would strenuously repeat to his objectors, who would argue that poetry is not needed since we have the final revelation. And he says, no, well, even the final revelation speaks in metaphors. So poetry is ever present. Now, it just so happens that poetry is no longer needed where we live in the society that is realizing all of our aspirations. So, poetry, of course, the children are poets by nature, we are. And because they seek something beyond appearances. But now once we live in a world where all of the appearances are realizing our ultimate aspirations, they're incarnating those aspirations. There's no point seeking beyond the appearances, beyond the mask. We are the mask. Everything is a mask, and a mask of a mask. Truth is the mask, to speak of in Nietzschean terms. And it struck me that that this the ultimate goal, therefore, being integration in this world of appearances. What we really are afraid of is, at this point, is losing that integration, and maybe getting sick. Prevents us from being integrated. We want to survive and be integrated in this world of appearances. And so, of course, poetry has to be abolished and replaced, in our case, today's case, by technology, technological instruments, a technology that wants to, of course, takes the place of poetry because it doesn't look for the beyond anymore. It tries to consolidate the hic und nunc, the here and now, without any reference to a beyond. Well, it seems to me that you have encountered some difficulties in your life because your language was not compatible with the expectations, the demands of the society that seeks no and allows for no beyond. Is that right, or what would you say about that?
That's about, well, I've developed an aphorism to express it very briefly, which is, my life has become poetry. The only problem is people fucking hate poetry.
Well, is that a paraphrase from the Gospels? They will hate you if they hate you. Don't be surprised.
That's something I said to my friend Brian one day, and he thought it was quotable, so he told a few people, and now it's like my aphorism to describe my life. My life has become a poem, and people read poems looking for the punctuation. They read for rhyme when there is none, and when there is no rhyme, they look for it. And the stanzas are not apparent because when you pause, they interject. And if you tell the same poem twice in two different moods or two different accents, they think you're saying two different poems and that you have multiple personality disorder.
Yeah.
And if you say your poem too rapidly, they accuse you of being befuddled. If you say too slowly, they think you're on dope. If you if you spell it out for them in King's English on black ink on a white page, they think you're pretentious and want to be the next Shakespeare the Great. And if you post it to Facebook, they don't read it except for 2 seconds between an ad for liposuction and an ad for hamburgers. And so how do you speak poetry except by becoming a Zen master who does it without people noticing.
Dante had a similar problem, and mostly his brethren had a similar problem. Some of them were condemned. Some of them had problems with authorities. And Dante's, so to speak, solution to that was to have a kind of, shall we say, to hide in a kind of limbo, yeah, where you don't. Oh, and it's kind of language that mediates the two, in fact, in full awareness of an fundamentally unbridgeable gap between the poet, in other words, the man who lives in full openness to what is not given in terms of appearances, and those who hide it from the beyond, those who would do anything to close themselves to the beyond and to set their lives up so that no reminder would be needed, no reminder would be admitted, in fact, of a beyond. So somehow he sets himself.
You're losing me a tad.
Okay.
Let me try to restate it, and I'll just leave an ellipse where I got lost.
Good.
Dante was in a similar situation. People in his life were being condemned, either literally or, or really, living in a kind of theocracy at the time, of course. And the solution he developed, being a man, much like myself, somewhat perhaps, he developed a solution to remain in limbo, into a liminal space in the parking lot between the courthouse and the liquor shop, and sitting in his car, perhaps, this is modern day, and to use in between this unbridgeable gap between the liquor house and the courthouse, or between the DMV and the mechanic shop, or it's a terrible one, but Nietzsche always said, when you give analogies, don't give one, even though it can balance, give a couple so it can walk around. Between the Catholic Church on the block and the Masonic temple, and which always creepily seems to be right across the street from the Catholic Church. Fancy that. But to remain in this and to use language in such a way as ...
Yes.
Well, that's the ellipse for you to fill in.
All right. Well, yes, mediating. Okay, well, you see these poets, some of his best friends, some of his teachers, he has in the underworld, the Inferno. Now, he has one in particular who's a great teacher of his, who is somehow with the Sodomites. As it turns out, and very few people, I believe, have realized this among the interpreters, as it turns out, he's hiding among the Sodomites, so as to, even though he wasn't, so as to cover up other charges which would have been more threatening to him, specifically one of impiety, and so going against the God of the authorities, as it is understood, or understood by the authorities. So that was his main problem. They would have branded him an atheist, just as Socrates was considered an atheist, because
Right.
whatever he said did not seem to match the understanding of divinity, of the nature of divinity, that was shared by his enemies.
Right.
So he's actually, Dante has him hide among the sodomites, and he said, "Oh yeah, let me follow them up. I want to, this is," and again
the local gay bar, yeah.
okay, it's better if I hide among them, because otherwise they chop my head off, basically. Now Dante is presenting him in these terms where he's vindicating his life and his work in his own comedy. And so he looks at him, he says, and he looks like, in poetic terms and in metaphors, of course, he says, he reminded me of one of these chevaliers who, in Florence, they have these old festivities where they have to compete for some flag, and they're running in the streets on these horses, and they have to catch the flag. And he says, and he reminds me of one of those, and not one of those who loses, but one of those who wins. And this would sound completely inappropriate to describe this guy who is stuck there among the hiding behind among the sodomites. He said, what is that? Well, actually, Dante's vindicating. He says, I'm going to take that work of yours, and I'm going to carry it through, and you will win through me. So what's the difference between the two? Dante is working and writing and living as if in the shadow of the authorities. So he is speaking their language, and he is playing with it gently, ever so gently, so that it may say what ought to be said. So that he is redeeming, as it were, a language that in its origins was spoken to bespeak the otherworldly. It was then sucked up into immanence by the establishment, and he's picking it up, and he's saying, you look, see, he's letting it speak or bespeak the otherworldly again. He's letting the regular language, just by readjusting it, retuning it slightly, and people then notice, oh, look, he quotes this poem or this prayer, this oratio, but he's modified it. Why? Maybe he made a mistake, yeah? Or maybe, I don't know, yeah? But maybe he's a modernist today, they say, yeah? Okay, he wants to subvert the church. No, he's actually fine-tuning it. Yeah, he's as if
that reminds me of a quote, but it's really amusing. Maybe a little comedic relief, even. I just like to share it from The Red and the Black by Stendhal, because every chapter in that novel begins with a different quote, and they're all misattributions. They're just things that he made up. And this one is attributed to Immanuel Kant, and I have it down to memory, and it goes: "The first drawing room of youth, alone and unsupported. The glance of a woman was enough to intimidate me. I supposed a man was my enemy because he had looked gravely upon me. And yet, amid the frightful torments of my timidity, a fine day could be so fine." Immanuel Kant. Very funny. And beautiful. It's a beautifully expressed sentiment. And it's something that Immanuel Kant was completely incapable of, right? Because every other word out of Immanuel Kant's mouth was around 900 syllables long. And, my own father has read the Critique of Pure Reason backwards and forwards as if it was the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and he's the chief priest of the Tibetans. And he's at family dinners growing up, my father would try to convey some of the wisdom he had indulged in from Immanuel Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. So the only reason I brought that whole thing up is because you were talking about the quotes that Dante was using.
Yes.
And it was a way of a way of subtly saying, I'm one of you and I'm not one of you all at once. And Stendhal was doing a adjacent but somewhat different thing, perhaps, in which he would begin all of his chapters with pseudo quotes from famous individuals, in which they were quoted saying something completely opposite what they would ever have actually said. So, you take a Goethe and you take a Kant and you swap their words and you end up with something kind of funny, or whatever it may be. Take Obama's speech and a Trump speech, and you use CGI magic to make Obama give a Trump speech and Trump give an Obama speech, and you have comedy. So that's all that was. Just a little comedic relief, just something that sprang to mind because Marco, you're a man who's so learned, and talking to you, it's hard enough for someone like me to follow along your chain of reasoning sometimes. So I'm slowing you down a little bit and trying to make this thing a little bit more tangible, just if even for my own sake.
And for the general public.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Well, sure. I mean, you can also have spoofs, of course, and as far as Kant is concerned, I don't know if you're familiar with a painter, an American painter, once had this work that he titled the Triumph of Pure Reason, and of course it was with reference to Kant. And there he has these. I guess he was part of the Bostonian social realist school, but there he had a group of mafiosi, of mafia bosses, and they're all meeting. They're criminals. They're brutes, and smoking their cigars, and it all fits well. It is. They follow their own rules. It is the triumph of pure reason. That's what he called it. But again, for anybody who is still reading Kant, Kant is I think it is good to study him, if for nothing else, to better understand ourselves and our current predicament. People who are still reading Kant ought to realize that he's aiming at the establishment of a society in which it's a universal society in which everybody is welcome and everyone can integrate independently of their, shall we say, moral qualities. In other words, the angel and the devil alike can be perfectly and equally integrated in the society that is helping establish. So in our society, it is a society of regulations, of rules, of propositions, of abstractions, you might say, a nominalist almost society, but a society where ultimate reality is replaced by an as if, an ideal. So what is, I think, intriguing is that, and people should remember this in following Kant, is that devils and angels alike on an equal footing. If you don't have them on an equal footing, you cannot have the establishment of that society. It is the ultimate incarnation and fulfillment, if you like, of regulations, of protocols. Everything is out there. They are fulfilling our loftiest dreams, because there's, anything other than that would be bad. In fact, even an expression of radical evil. The poet would be evil. The classical Platonic poet would be, the Platonic, because he is bespeaking the otherworldly, would be evil. And he deserves to be imprisoned.
He's rebelling against this treaty between
he stands as a threat as a
to the standing order.
terrible threat to that society. He is telling us, no, the devils do not deserve being, and they are not on an equal footing with good men. And what is a good man now? It's not the man who lives by his propositions, where everything is, fits in the little drawers, but it's a man that is continuously opening up the drawers, so to speak, and exposing them to a light that is not that of the society.
Right. Well, because it's, well, yeah, right. I mean, I could add to that, but I'm just be restating. I mean, well, yeah, because, insofar as you read the Bible, the story has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and we're always, we don't know the time or the hour, but we're always in a state of hastening toward the concluding, symbol crash, the apex, the climax of the story, and it seems like what Kant would hope to erect, or rather, if you like, flatten, is any aspirations beyond the here and now and the working out of kinks and the fixing of supercomputers and bicycles.
Okay, so somebody might object that there is a justification for his move. Obviously, I mean there's a
well, yeah,
something
he was at the
to
tail.
it.
From what I understand, not that I've read Kant because it's incredibly boring to me, but from what I understand, he came at the tail end of a long series of other German philosophers, and he was the guy who finally wrote the book that had everyone in a twist, because they had been trying to erect all of these systems and duking it out, and here he said, well, you want a system that encompasses all of your systems even though you hate each other? Well, here you go, and my name is Kant, and okay. And there you go, and that's Kant.
There's a price to be paid. That is something that we ought to be conscious of. There's a price to be paid, and the price might very well turn out to be dire. And if we
right, I mean,
concentrate on it,
yeah. I mean, I think the objective now for humanity as a whole, the plan, the master plan, whoever the master is, has a plan in which everyone behaves according to protocol at all times. And when you put on your toothpaste into your toothbrush, you put on 6.7 microjoules of cavity tar cleaning micro silicon or something, weighed on an atomic scale, so that there's not a molecule too much or too few, and and that your teeth are just eggshell off-white ever so slightly, and that everyone has one cavity and one root canal, and there's 55 or 56, 55 and 3/4, and so everything is they're trying to turn, they, quote unquote, the master is trying to turn human beings into a completely predictable dilemma. So even if people misbehave, and because here in Steubenville, this place used to be called Little Chicago, and I go outside right now, you see them, the little Chicagoans, and and that's allowed, that's fine, do your crack, do your heroin, do what you have to do, so long as you're doing it in the way and in the setting that we've set for you to do such things, right? And so, yeah, go right ahead. And when you want to holler, go ahead and holler. And you want to do something nasty to one of your roommates or to your landlord, or maybe you are the landlord and you're doing something nasty to your tenants, go right ahead and do it. That's allowed too, so long as when you do it, and you make the place a stinking, reeking mess, you do it according to protocol. And so, yeah, there's a dead rat, but that rat better be, weighed according to the atomic scale. and the stench, might make your nose fall off your face, but that's also weighed in the atomic scale. And so, you know, this is it's not like hedonism can be eradicated. It's not really of any desire, any plan to eradicate hedonism. In fact, it's encouraged, so long as you do it according to protocol.
Oh
And
yes, clearly.
yeah. And you can have your pleasure, but we'll tell you how to have your pleasure, and we'll tell you what kind of vibrator to buy if you want that. And if
It's
you want
so
to,
they selling it. They're selling that pleasure.
well, yeah,
They're selling everything. Fear.
right,
Fear, as a matter of
yeah,
fact, is the ultimate
right.
commodity.
Everyone living in a state of fear, basically. Yeah,
It's
exactly.
merchandise.
Fear.
It's merchandise. Merchandise
Right.
fear, merchandise passions.
Well, because fear is the limitless commodity. Because you can always fear more, and you can always make people more afraid. And so, ever since the digital became so prevalent, this is my somewhat derivative interpretation from a guy named Douglas Rushkoff, that ever since the digital realm took over the real, the virtual replaced the real, the virtual replaced virtue. Virtue became virtual. We reached a state where the only way to expand the economy is to traffic in non-tangibles, because we know how to grow crops. We got too much food. Paul thinks we're all going to be on bread lines. I think that Paul is a little bit, he married a much older woman. He lives in a really old house. Paul is a man I deeply respect, and I would not be who I am without. But in my opinion, my critique of Paul, ever so slightly, is that he's got tons and tons of wisdom, but it's old school wisdom, and there's a bit of a need for new wine skins for Paul, I think. But when in the digital replace, the only way to keep the economy expanding was to traffic in non-tangibles, because there's food, there's housing. You come to Steubenville. If these guys get some kind of part-time job to live over here, this complex, this old converted hotel that now basically is, filled with vermin, not, like bed bugs and stuff, and all but the barbed wire around the window. If they get a part-time job, any old where, even if they just have enough gumption to fake the documentation for a minute, they will be given a car scot-free. And so, it's a weird situation, because materially speaking, we've completely solved the puzzle. We've cracked the code as a human species. And but there's a demand for profit margins to rise and rise and rise until the moon crashes into the sun. And the majority of people kind of know it in a way, but it's not so much memorable. People don't really live by it. It's not tattooed on the mind yet. But the point is really just that we figured everything out, more or less, materially. But if the haves are going to continue being the haves, and the have-nots are going to continue being the have-nots, and of course they must, and of course they must, well, then what do you traffic in other than something like fear? Because I have a friend who's given me a little bit of money so I can buy coffee and sit in this place and talk to you right now. This is a guy who, really, really kind of a computer whiz dude. And he had a lot of idealistic notions, and he had his own company for a long time where he was trying to do something very idealistic, and he was working with a lot of open source programmers to do something incredibly idealistic with technology. And it was a castle in the clouds, turned out. Like all castles in the clouds, it evaporated. It rained down a big thunderstorm on its head one day. And so where does he turn? Well, he goes and gets a tech job because he's a computer whiz. And he tries out at Google, and he tries out at Amazon, and he doesn't make it to the big leagues. But where does he land up such that he's making well over six figures, and can give me a little bit of chump change so I can buy my mocha Lisa, as they call it here, a big cappuccino with whipped cream on top and chocolate. named after the Mona Lisa. There's a big life-size replica over there.
How poetic.
Leonardo's
How
coffee shop,
poetic.
place called. And
the new poetry is advertisement, by the way.
Yeah. And it sucks. But I mean, it's very genius, but it sucks. Geico, I always think of in that regard, because a gecko gets his tail cut off, grows right back. Oh, a little fender bender, grow right back. That tail of yours. I always think of that one. Or Aflac, the ducks and the goose, like duck, duck, goose, kindergarten game. Duck, 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 duck. Don't want to be that goose. Yeah, we're all the ducks. We've all got insurance. Don't be the goose. He doesn't know what he's doing. Whack. And but this guy, you know, he works at a cybersecurity company. And what does cybersecurity mainly traffic in but fear? Because, you know, you can always build moats around moats around moats, and you can fill them with crocodiles and alligators and stingrays. And so no matter how secure you actually are, you can always be more fearful and try to erect yet another moat or yet another high wall for people, and yet another Tommy gun that's controlled by a drone, you know. And so it's really it's war, basically.
It is
war.
Yes, if I may say, there is an attempt to defend the society beyond all possible threats.
Yeah.
So you want to get rid of those threats, and of course, the threats. Who falls into that category of threats? Of course, the ultimate threat. I mean, what is the ultimate threat? It is the ultimate reminder of the bankruptcy of your project. You hear?
Yeah. Sorry, I've got friends who are trying to reach me.
What is a threat? The threat is a reminder of the bankruptcy of your project. And the ultimate reminder is the poet, necessarily. So is the one who digs out the roots and shows you, oops, there aren't no roots, or the roots are dead, or they're rotten. And so everything, this beautiful castle turns out to be a castle of cards in the best of cases. So you want to
super glued together.
Yeah, in the best of cases. So you want to get rid of any kind of reminder of the sort, which is considered a threat. And so you will have everybody hired to work hard to eliminate even the vaguest sense, the vaguest reminder, right? Any kind of threat has to be cast out. And yeah, you might say, you mentioned, you know, what happened, more alligators, more water. Well, you just keep going. That's the whole. It turns out that we're specializing in getting rid of the reminders, and getting rid of threats. That's our specialization.
I don't know why this. I don't know if this is apropos or not, but it springs to mind, so I'll share it. With just sort of the superstitious belief that because it sprang to mind, it might have some valence here. I just heard the saying from somebody that sort of an aphoristic saying goes, you can tell what people are hiding by how they're hiding it. You can tell what people are hiding by how they're hiding it. And so no matter what you're hiding and how well you hide it, you can ultimately tell what it is they're hiding, not because you know what it is with your eyes or your senses, but because you see how it's being hidden.
Yeah.
And there's a sort of imprint, there's an imprint created, there's a photographic negative, as it were, created, a kind of negative space around whatever it is that's being concealed based on how it's being concealed. So you take the case of Mask World. What's being concealed? Nose and the mouth.
Yes.
And what does the nose and the mouth do? Talks.
But this is the logos is the ultimate reminder of the beyond, and that
The
has to,
word,
yeah, it
the
has to,
word,
and it has
the
to
word.
be it's shunned. That is ostracized too, and it has to be replaced by the um, orchestra or the cacophony, if you like, um, of this new word, which is entirely structured, controlled, predictable. I speak to somebody over the phone, and the what is it for the to ask a question about my phone. Ultimately, that's what you're speaking about, and they keep asking the same question. I answer and I tell them, look, what kind of code do you need? And they repeat, yes, because, sir, very good, very well, we need this code again. So, you try to explain to them something, and 10 times, for 10 times, the person she's programmed to repeat the same question as if you were speaking to a machine.
I had an experience like that recently where I was getting a gym membership at this place, $10 a month, very very affordable over here. And I called up the phone line, and at first it gave me the robot, and it gave me this big long spiel about a 6 or 7 sentence long paragraph about when you come here to this gym, you get this membership, that membership, and then if you do this, it's free until this date, and it's a wonderful place to be, and blah blah blah. And then I pressed the button after that was all over to get to the human being because I wanted to register.
But it's the same thing, you find out.
Yeah, and then it was so weird because I I said, oh, I'd like to register, and here's my deal, and I think I'll just take this one, and how about it? Just to pull the trigger, and then she was like, well, here at this wonderful gym, we have this
Yes.
plan and that plan,
And we're here for you.
and until this date, and blah 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 blah. And I was like, I cut in like halfway through the spiel, and I said, well, I'm ready to do this one, so I would just do it. And she took a breath,
And she
and
starts
then it was
again.
like, and then it was like a recorder. It started again, and she just
Yes.
took off exactly where she left off.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
and I just had to listen to her with an incredibly ironical smirk on my face because, lady, I know what I want. I just heard the spiel from the robot. I don't need you to be, but it's really reminiscent of the final novel by Walker Percy, The Thanatos Syndrome, involving a main character who is gone or something. I haven't read the whole book, but I read the first chapter one time. He comes back, and everybody is doing that. Well, like actually, everyone is sort of a sex crazed, like chimpanzee, more or less, and they're all fornicating and going all buck wild. But
How
then
lovely.
you ask them any kind of question, any kind of factual question. You say like, which way to Waterworld or something, and they will say, you take the northwest exit off of the roundabout at the 13th turn, and then go 7 and 2.5 miles, and it's on your left right after the third mailbox, and then you will be charged $1.77 to watch the porpoises and $1.33 to see the fish. And
Yes.
and they just rattle it off, and they go into like a trance state. And that's sort of what smartphones have done to us, because everyone's sort of an idiot nowadays as a result of smartphones, because they think, well, I don't need to know anything. I don't need to know how to get around anything. I don't know how to make my way to the grocery store with my own head. I can just do it with my hand down to computer phone. And so, everyone's a genius and an idiot all at the same time.
Yes. Well, this is we're transferring our we're transferring our freedom. Yes, the possibility of virtue uh, onto the system. It is the system that will take care of us. This is Stalinistic, of course. It is the system, the government, the authorities, the regime that dispenses us with the effort. Yeah. Why make an effort?
Well, in the book of Matthew, I think those herd of swine might have had a GPS too, and and my GPS took me down the wrong way down a one-way street the other day, and we're ripe for it, because all we got to do is keep on this, if what has already happened in the past 20 years happens like several more iterations, before we know it, these things will be implanted in our skulls. We won't be able to have a free thought without like pressing a button and by our hairline. And then what happens when the evil master of humanity decides to snap his fingers and send us all off a cliff?
Well, in its
Dramatic,
essence,
obviously, but
sure, man. In its essence, there is nothing new. This is what tyrants or have always been up to. Their favorite element is flattery, so they will promise you the world, and then you will end up as a complete slave. The main difference, of course, what unleashes the current predicament with all of its peculiarities, is the development of technology. It has helped. It is all we understand that technology all these great toys are fine in themselves, if you like. The problem is, well, aside from the means of production, because you need a pyramid of slaves to produce them, but aside from that, and aside from the fact that in themselves they're distractions from real problems, the problem is that they're always in the hands of somebody. So this whole infrastructure of technology is always going to be in the hands of someone. And since nobody's asking if they're in the hands of Socrates or his detractors, his wildest and worst detractors, it's a good bet, to say that they're in the hands of the others, not in the hands of a good men. So they're there, of course, as tyrants to manipulate people. And okay, we want to, we give up our souls, and in exchange, we receive our cages.
yeah.
It's just as simple as that. The only, again, 2,000 years ago, what we have today, what they're setting up today, at great speed, would have been unthinkable.
Right, of course.
How could you? And today you have these videos. What do they call this? This kind of motivational videos by these huge company. I don't know what it's called. Technological company. Yeah, I don't know. Where they telling you well, this is the progress. This is the future. Your future we're setting up, and they show you that you'll be able to control the computer at a distance without speaking, with your mind. If only, but how do you do that? It's very simple. You stick a little chip in your brain, and in the future, the future that we're trying to build up for you, for you, because you need that, and you'll be able to control. You'll be able to control the computers at a distance, without having to move. Of course, it doesn't tell you that at the same time, the computer is telling you what to tell the computer.
Right.
And again, they say, well, look at this sick person because we're so charitable. We're such lovely people. We want to help the people in need. And look, this person might not have an arm or is paralyzed. So we can have somebody else who moves through these electrodes. Move your arm at a distance.
Nice.
And he's there for you. Now, all in a sudden, tomorrow, it turns out this other person is Big Brother, who is telling everybody to move the arm and the legs in the same direction.
Or to dance the Macarena.
Right.
You're going to be dancing the Macarena across the state line.
Or jump off a cliff.
Or jump on a trampoline, or whatever it might be.
Just jump off the cliff.
Or jump off the cliff. Or just sort of sit down forever.
And maybe you'll just be watching. Your ultimate reward is that you'll be able to just watch your body do all kinds of marvelous things without you having to think about it. You're just watching and do it.
There's a movie called Gamer from 2009 where that whole scenario is more or less played out. It's a really fun movie. It's by the same duo, these guys, forget their name, who made Crank and Crank 2 High Voltage, which are both very highly amusing,
Mm,
sort of raunchy movies. But in Gamer, it's a wonderful thing in 2009 where people more or less prostitute their bodies out as surrogates for like from hour X to hour Y. And there's in some kind of filthy basement somewhere, there's a horribly rotund person who's eating fried chicken or something, and all the gravy dribbling down their
lovely.
millions of chins, and they're controlling a stealth, perfect complexion having blonde woman as she roller skates around some kind of mall and has sexual encounters with every Tom, Dick, and Harry in the land, and 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 she ends up escaping, and the whole movie is the whole plot is it's like a prison escape essentially, where she has a real like old boyfriend or husband
Mm,
who is sort of a renegade and has
yes,
rejected all the chips, and
yes,
he manages to get her free, but they have to have a showdown with a big boss battle at the end,
yes,
with the guy who's calling all the shots, and he's some
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
cheesy villain. Fun though.
Oh, well, a horrible scene, and we are being accustomed to watching, to hearing of horrible scenarios. What we ought not to forget is that what is critical here is that in presenting you with all of these horrible matrices, these advertisers, these um, new poets, it's a cast of new poets, the poets that serve the regime. Um, these new poets are at the same time, tongue in cheek, indirectly, if you like, implicitly suggesting, in fact, inculcating the sentiment, the presentiment, the feeling, yeah, that there is no alternative. That
Mm.
yes, all of these nightmares, all of these dystopias are abhorrent, vile, but what is the alternative? There is no
Right.
return. So it
Yeah.
is the ultimate threat again is the point of return. The real poet is the point of return of the otherworldly, which is presupposed by this situation, this present scenario. There is no return. There is no
Yeah. Right.
possibility. So no matter how disgusting our current situation is, ultimately we should just make an effort, so to speak, an effort to integrate in it, to adapt to it, to accept it, and to perhaps even revel in it. Sure, let's roll in this mud or in the feces of Romulus, as Cicero once had it. Let's
Yeah.
just accept hell. Sodom and Gomorrah is our fate. Let's just
Right.
accept it. Stop being a metaphysician.
Better,
Stop
better,
dreaming.
better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven.
Yes, because heaven is a fake. Is fake.
Well, and
This
even
is
if you make
real.
it, well, and even if you make it to heaven, what kind of heaven is that? Is that a real heaven? And you're gonna serve and be like humble and develop virtue. I mean, it seems
You
kind of
would
like
be
a
very
done
selfish.
deal.
You would be very selfish.
Oh yeah, I guess so. I guess so. Yeah. Who are you? Yeah. I mean, come on, the party's down over there. I know it's sort of scary, but join the club. Ugh. Yeah.
Well, if
Yeah.
we're all in it together, once we get rid of all residues, poetic residues,
Oh
we
yeah.
will be able to solve all of these glitches that we have in the system.
Sure.
And then we'll be able to work things out. I
Yeah.
know
We.
for now it's ugly, but we're getting there. If we can only get rid of
Yeah.
these
Oh
openings,
yeah.
these
Images.
glitches.
Yeah. Well. Here's a little skit. Oh, hello there, madam. Oh, hey there, doctor. How's it going? Well, I've got some rather difficult news to convey to you. Oh, what is it? Well, we did the X-rays and MRI scans, and it came back positive. Well, is it serious? Well, no, it's a routine operation, but it's a good thing we caught in time. Well, what is it? Well, here I'll show you the slides. Click. You see right there, next to your medulla oblongata. It's hard to see. Hey, nurse, would you enhance that? All right, there it's coming through. You see that thing? Yeah. See, the technical term is the imago Dei. It's a little image of God right there, and we're gonna try to get that out.
That.
Yeah, because if we don't do anything, it can spread.
Yes, you extract that. Yes.
Yeah. Don't worry.
If you don't smile, and this is in pedestrian terms, if the kid is not smiling, but this has been going on for quite a while. If the kid is not smiling all the time, so something must be wrong with him. He better be on medication.
Oh yeah.
Antidepressants, and smile all the time. They've been doing this for years, and it's all over in France. I've experienced things like that. There was a child who was studying violin under this teacher who turns out to be someone who follows the psychiatrist, and so the teacher at some point recommends the parent, you should take your kid to my psychiatrist. How lovely.
Yeah.
And from the psychiatrist to the psychic medication, and we can all be in line and all agree. The agreement is the end game.
Yeah.
At what price? Sure. At what price? I'm asking people. At what price?
Human blood. Blood. So is the price.
It's easy to agree. It's easy to agree. As an educator, as an educator, even as a parent, say your child starts acting silly. Well, you go there and you make an effort as a father not to flatter him into his silliness, but to tell him, sit up straight, behave civilly. Now, that is a bad thing, because now who are you to tell the child to do something he's not already doing?
All right. Yeah, you got to flatter children into everything.
Because the regime is flattering us into telling us you will be free as soon as you buy your cage.
Yeah, you buy it's a nice cage, and maybe you can get a better one than the other cages some people have.
Well, in France, I took my child to school. He's 5 years old. Okay, he skipped, so he had to move on to the class with a 6-year-old. Well, the teacher greets him in the morning. I got him out of that school as soon as things got that bad, really. Greets him in the morning, and she says, good morning, how are you? No, first thing is, perhaps hello, good morning. What a beautiful mask you have today.
Ooh, well, thank you, teacher.
And I told my son, this is tantamount to telling a slave, what beautiful chains you're wearing today.
Where did you get those chains? Is
They're
that
lovely.
Chains R Us, or is that Chain Utopia down the block?
This is pathetic. But again and again, our focus, our effort should be in drawing attention to the dignity of a return, of the life of return, of the human being who lives in the name of that return. This is the core of the Platonic Renaissance, incidentally, but in fact of all genuine poetry. There is this apologia, this defense of a life of return. And it has never been as impressing as it is
What do you mean
today.
exactly by return? This is something you've been saying that is still a little opaque to me when you say the life of
Yes,
return, the poet of return is the real poet of return
yes, yes.
versus escape.
Well,
Or,
Leo Strauss has this. He was once asked to give a lecture on these two terms, progress or return, and thinking about it, he realized, yes, it makes sense. It is um, it is fair to speak in these terms. Um, and then he sets out to explain these alternatives to um, make them plain. Uh, we are living in an eccentric world, as a good interpreter of Dante once put it. Dante is essentially a concentric poet,
hmm,
returning to the center,
hmm,
and the center is
hmm,
not just a dot. The center is this opening. It's not a black hole at the center of the universe. There is a door open to
yeah.
uh, uh, um, to an otherworldly dimension.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I suppose what I'm trying to figure out is how this relates to my situation because I've become sort of this open person, and if
This.
you know, and if someone asks me for money on the street, if I can do it without breaking my back, I'll do that. Or if someone asks me for a ride, I'll give them a ride. And if someone wants to talk to me and I have time, I'll talk to them about whatever they want to talk about. I'll extricate myself as soon as it seems like I am in any kind of situation which would get truly dangerous. But I give everybody the benefit of the doubt, more or less. And a lot of people don't really deserve it.
Yes, of
but I
course
give it,
not.
but I kind of, and I need to learn how to really hone the virtue of prudence. Not that I've honed it that well to begin with, but I need to really hone it like a samurai sword because becoming the way I've become, I get into hairy situations simply by being honest. And, I've got this or that vice, and I'm not a perfect human being, and there are sins on my conscience. But, you know, objectively speaking, my sins are rather puny in according to any kind of criminal code or any kind of official mandate. Uh, of this kind or that kind. And so, really, my crime is not so much that my sins are large and in charge, but my willingness to be open and thus for my sins to be exposed is far greater than your average bear. And so, it's really a question to me now, how I live and what kind of situation I can settle into because as of right now, I'm sitting here in limbo and waiting for a miracle. There's a song I like. The lyrics go, "If you're waiting for a miracle, you better clean up your mind. Don't you think it's time to clean up your mind if you're waiting for a miracle?" So I'm waiting for a miracle and I'm trying to clean up my mind.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I don't know what form my life is going to take from here on out because I'm separated from my family. I haven't seen either of my children in a month. I haven't seen my wife in a month. I haven't spoken to my wife in a month.
Hmm.
I haven't spoken to my parents in over a month. Who has talked to me?
Hmm.
A lady off the street styles herself spiritual counselor and a healer.
Hmm.
Is the first woman, the first person who actually hung out with me, like fully. Well, other than some friends I had on my travels, because I went Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Nashville, New Orleans, North Carolina, Atlanta. Atlanta, North Carolina, D.C., New York City. And from New York City, I saw some friends there, and I settled down for a little Shabbos in the Hasidic neighborhood of Brooklyn. And I saw some people there. The reason I ended up paying a little bit out the nostril for that hotel room in New York City is that I was really getting worn down, pretty threadbare worn from staying at people's places, even though they're very nice, even though I hung out with them. People's charity and hospitality is highly limited at the end of the day, and even when they try their very best for it to not be limited, it just kind of is. It's a limited resource, and I feel like I've already mined all of the charity on the Eastern Seaboard from old friends that I have to mine, and so really the first woman who didn't have any, I guess I should clarify, the first person who had no prior relationship with me, who didn't really have any expectations, false or otherwise, about me, who actually hung out with me, who heard my story, who told me her story, who could actually relate to my story in any significant measure, yes, was a complete and utter stranger and sort of like a street person. And so what do I do with that? And what do I do with the fact that I feel far more comfortable, basically, among, hoodlums nowadays than I do among the educated classes, even though I can speak like an Ivy League educated person. And even though I have a whole roster of books by different classical luminaries, which I have more or less at my beck and call to the degree I remember them. And, I could settle right down. I could just drop in, do a little crash on my friend, a Dominican priest, who's been instantiated as the chaplain at this Ivy League school, one of the Ivy Leaguers, and I could just drop in, and I could say, hey there, Father. How about we sit down for tea time with the professors and all of these bright and brilliant tenured professors, and how about I contain in my underwear drawer all the things that have happened to me? And I could do that, and I would get along smashingly. And I could speak their lingo, and I could do that, and I could cross my legs and look all hoity-toity and put on a little lip gloss, why don't I? Because everyone in academia is a man, is slightly effeminate. And I could do that perfectly well. And they'd probably wonder after I left if it hadn't been made clear. Oh, where is he? He's a visiting professor from where then? Ah, okay, Oxford, is it? Yes, well, if I speak like this, I suppose it would be Oxford then. Interesting. And of course, we do things a little bit differently there, but I won't bore you with it. And so
you pat each other on the shoulder. How excellent.
Yes, and excellent. And where are the good boudoirs around here? Hush, hush, I have a missus in the wing with a couple of them. I get how that shit works, and I also, and then say then my get segued, and I'm trying to make it over to the Ivy Leaguers, but my car breaks down, and I'm on some blind duck scum alley with the Skid Row people, and then immediately I can go into that mode too, and I can go, yo, bro, hey, hey, I'm sorry, dog, but my shit fucking broke down right now. And I don't have fucking AAA, and I'm just really looking for guidance here because in the middle of the fucking night, and I don't know where to sleep in that fucking car in this terrible ass neighborhood. No offense, dude, but you bring me to some place, man, and I got a bit of cash, throw you away, man, what the fuck you need, but I need to find some kind of mechanic. I think it's, I think my battery went bad, there's some shit. I got to be at this place, this fucking Ivy League place. It's a long story, and so I could do that, So I can do both of those. And so where do I belong?
Okay. Tolstoy had a rather redeeming view of the alternative to the establishment. There's others who spoke of the savage as a noble alternative to the establishment, right?
True so.
Now, and others after him, but
oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah.
sure.
It's everybody, pretty much.
Yes, but again, on the question of the task of the poet, we have an official caste that has sort of incarnated or pretends to incarnate the goal of poetry, and that is authoritative now. And then you have the subjects who are left behind. And you have, obviously, between point A and point B, you always have point C. So this whole stretch of land that is between these two poles is out for grabs. So the poet comes in and stretches out between them, and he's a jongleur. He's playing with both poles and mediating them. That is his play. He doesn't belong to the ghetto. He doesn't belong to the elite, the bourgeois. And yet he can speak. Yeah, he can walk with kings and speak with crowds, and the line by Kipling. He can mediate. Somehow he mediates the two without belonging.
What's the Kipling one?
I'm referring to the poem if you can do this and that, and if you can speak with kings and walk with crowd. What is it the other way around? And keep your virtue.
The wind is getting your microphone, by the way.
Aha. Okay. Well,
it's the first time it's happened.
All right. Well, I'll have to speak to the gods of the wind. But okay, the poet there is a mediator at the beginning of the Convivio, just to remain on Dante, not to go elsewhere. So,
okay,
because he's a good point of reference. The beginning of the Convivio, Dante has this banquet, or actually, this Convivio is the banquet, and the divine minds, the divine figures who are feasting. This is the food of the gods. And then there's the sheep, the animals in the back, below, and they have nothing to eat, basically, none of this, and they cannot partake in this delight, this delicious food. And so what does he do? Dante decides to come and pick up these crumbs, right, from the banquet of the gods, and he mixes it up with water, and he produces this hydromel, this whatever it is that can feed so that the poor sheep can partake in it. This is the big question. What is the task of the poet? What is the proper original task of the poet? Is it one of establishing a society in which masters and slaves are friends? Or is it one that points beyond these categories by mediating the two poles? We have some interference. So
Agreed.
Is his goal one of feeling at home, or is he fated somehow in this world to pretend, as it were, to be at home in both cases, and at the same time working undercover undercover, so to speak, and towards a third pole.
Sure. Just a moment. I'm going to step outside, and I think my signal will hold. I'm just going to step outside and have a cigarette
Okay.
while we talk. Just keep on talking.
Yes, there are substantial compromises to be made, but they don't entail by any necessity any kind of betrayal of ends, any kind of betrayal of a soul.
Sorry, sister. Sorry.
Okay, you're fine. Thank you.
Bye. Just nods are coming through. That's funny.
Are the sisters wearing their
The habits and their masks? Yeah.
The globalist neo-Islamic mask?
Yeah. And their habits as well, like flying nuns with the COVID mask on. Wow. Yeah.
Right. Well,
Crazy.
they ought to try to
What's that?
pray for a return to the previous pope. But anyway.
Oh yeah.
But yes, so there we have it. We will, necessarily there is a Socratic irony that allows the poet, which is to say the honest man, to live among others. It is an irony that accompanies him all the time. He has to pretend to be somehow like everybody else.
Yeah.
And if you don't, I mean, the ancients knew this. If you don't, you either become like everybody else, which is not an alternative than any kind of honest man would accept or even consider, or you go live in the desert, as in one of these
Right.
hermits, and
Right.
you become a monk in the original sense of the term.
I know a priest who is really in love with the Desert Fathers, and reads them extensively, and really kind of wants to be a hermit, even though he's surrounded by people who his job is to minister to and to give sacraments to, and to lead in study groups and so on. And his dilemma is like, he wants to be a hermit, but the problem with that, with his dilemma in my mind, is that he doesn't really have enough reason to want to be a hermit yet. I think he finds it romantic, idealistic, utopian even. He's read a lot about it, but it's like a child reading a superhero novel or a comic book or something. He's got notions about it. He sees the wisdom. He perceives a very, very intelligent and astute and even holy man. But I got into kind of a tiff with him, because when it came right down to it, when I actually needed something tangible that was not just in the form of fatherly advice or a listening ear and shoulder to cry on, he was more or less entirely unequipped to render any actual tangible assistance. The only thing he really knows how to traffic in are intangibles. And the thing about the hermit in the desert, it occurs to me, is the reason he's a hermit in the desert is because if anybody is bold enough to see him in his little cave there and find him at whatever hours of the day he keeps there, when he's not digging through quicksand to find morsels to eat or what have you, whenever he decides to eat, if you actually can get him by the robe, by the hem of his garment, he'll give you the skin off his hide. And he's in a state of such intimacy with God that if you actually see him in the flesh and the bone, and you need anything from him, he will help you until he's blue in the face. Because what does it say? What does Jesus say? He says, "No greater love has man than this, that he laid down his life for his friend." And so, when you approach that level of perfection and the life of holiness, anybody, a hermit or anybody, you come to this curious spot where you're basically being asked to be a martyr almost, if the circumstances align that way. You live every day with sort of the apprehension that your life might be demanded of you in that sense. And so he retreats from the desert. He retreats to the desert because he knows that he's seeking that intimacy with God, but at the same time, he doesn't want anybody to find him. And so this priest I know reads these things. He hides away as well in the middle of the city. And he wants to be a hermit basically, but he's not really able to ever become one because he's in the middle of a city and he has duties and obligations. He's been there for a long time. And he's a dependable person.
I have a hard time hearing you now.
I'm sorry. Let me move over here. He's dependable to a degree. Is this a little better?
Yes.
Yeah, let me go in the shade. Did you lose any of my syllables, or am I still more or less audible, more or less intelligible? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so, he's dependable to a degree, but he'll never be at the point of being a Saint Isaac or somebody like that. Because he's not willing to go to the point where he would actually feel the need to be ejected from his throne and altar.
No.
Well, in my opinion, at least.
Well, the anachorite's life is a big question. It's the communion with unity, with divine unity, turning your life as much as possible into an imitation of divine unity. And so you're reflecting that unity. Now, it just so happens that Christianity is exposing, if only in the light of classical paganism, but I mean, in fact, of what we could call Platonism, a dimension of divinity that transcends unity.
Yeah.
It is not enough for the human being as such to reflect unity in his life. He is there to mediate the one and the many, and he is there to articulate in his life this tension, this conflict even between the one and the many. So, of course, we could again appeal to the term poetry and say, well, that is what poetry is up to. It is mediating the one and the many. It is not,
well,
and it's
poetry,
not. I should say, yes. Let me just say that. That it is not enough, in this pedantic and vulgar sense to say that, okay, with the way we achieve this is by establishing unity through multiplicity. This is the most ridiculous approach to the problem, which is a way of dismissing it. We will establish this unity through multiplicity. So, if you like, a pragmatic, even multicultural today approach to the very problem of this tension between the one and the many. No, in classical terms, the one has primacy and will always have primacy. This has to be understood. It is not that you cannot just invoke the new gods and turn everyone into a little god and solve the problem. It's not solved that way. This is just to open up that parenthesis to take care of that possible misunderstanding. It is a big challenge. It is a huge challenge, and it entails.
You'll have to repeat yourself a bit because I was spacing out. Sorry. Go back several sentences.
The mediation between the one and the many, is not to be understood, and so it is not correctly, if you like, adequately understood in terms, the materialist terms, in the pragmatist terms, as if the one were finally the result of the articulation of the many. Progressive terms, however you want to qualify this solution, in scare quotes, to the classical tension between the one and the many. Okay, so we'll have the many who will work out the one, and the one will be the result of the interaction of the many. We're in a universe that is a multiverse universe, whatever you want to call it, and now the many collaborating. No, that's as baloney.
So this might be a good point to make a little move I'd like to make, because we've been talking about poetry, yes. But I'd now like to interchange poetry with acting. You know, I was in the Shakespeare play and blah blah blah, but acting, you know, I did a little performance from you a moment ago, or I did the British thing, I did the street thing. And
we already addressed that when we said that the poet is necessarily treading in Socratic irony, and he is pretending, he's acting all the time. This is ironic. This is the Socratic irony of the poet, who pretends to be the locksmith, pretends to be the mechanic, pretends to be the professor. He speaks to everyone on their same level, and yet when he does so, he opens up that role to transcendence. He shows that that role is really just a role, and it's not where we are ultimately, and that, you know, this role is an opportunity for us to mirror what is beyond.
Yeah.
So we're always acting, of course. There's nothing extravagant or shall we say exceptional, if I may say so, about the actor. I mean, as a category, sure, but even the actor, the real actor, who is he? Is he somebody who is serving a director, who is serving a producer, who is serving the establishment, who is serving the devil? Or is he somebody who is pretending to be an actor? Is he acting in the sense of pretending to be an actor? Pretending to be in that role, and as he is playing the part of an actor, he is serving an end that transcends all human expectations, certainly the expectations of the progressive mind, the mind that aims at this society beyond transcendence. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you mentioned acting. That's great. But let us also, if I may say so, pretend and so to be actors. Let us pretend to be everything, but for a good reason. In this sense, Socrates is speaking, you know, with everyone in principle, in principle. And he's pretending, as it were, to be on the same level as his interlocutor. But he's not pretending in a vicious sense, in a cunning manner. or as, I don't know, Ivan Karamazov might be pretending in a sophistic manner. He has a higher calling, as it were. No?
Yeah. Right.
So it's all right. I mean, the main problem here, I think, is to as a, again, to get stuck in the role.
Yeah.
The roles are determinations, but the mind in itself is undetermined. Our human nature is undetermined. It is not limited to any particular role. It can fit in any particular role. It is very malleable in some sense. It can fit in any, but it does not belong to any. I am, you could say, my body, but my body is not me.
Yeah. There's a movie called The Tenant, Roman Polanski movie from like 1990 called The Tenant. It takes place in some kind of Eastern European country, very macabre little movie,
Yes?
where the character ends up committing suicide and then he jumps off his balcony because his neighbors don't like him and he can't find a place. No one likes him, no one's welcomes him. And he grows terribly lonely and dresses up like a lady and jumps off of a balcony into a little courtyard somewhere where the dutiful little Eastern European woman who runs the place, swiftly disposes of his body as if he had never existed. And there's a scene in that movie, and sort of like the climax of the movie for me, where he gets really blind drunk one night, and he's with some kind of very, very attractive woman he's sort of getting poetical with, and he's closing his eyes, and he's prostrate on his back on a bed, and he's saying, what am I? Am I my arm? You cut off my arm. I am me and my arm. You cut off both my legs. I am me and my legs and arm. You cut off my arms and my legs. I am me and all my arms and legs. But you cut off my head. Is it me and my head? Or is it me and my torso? What right has my head to say that it is me? By what right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
keeping in mind that Polanski is no Socrates.
Well, sure, but
keeping in mind.
Well, of course he's not, and
he is
terrible.
Yeah,
Actually, but I read his autobiography a long time ago, and of course, everyone knows the scoop with Polanski. But the main thing, because even though we began with a question of poetry and my initial email suggesting a number of topics, I was also bringing up the topic of scandal. And so the whole thing with scandal is that the person who is at the center of the scandal is viewed with total suspicion and is imbued with total guilt. And so, whether they're deserving of it or not, or to what extent there's some kind of alloyed mixture of the two things, of sinner and saint. The main thing about Polanski in reference to that subject, and the main reason I have no qualms about bringing him into the mix,
that's all right,
is because he's, he did a terrible thing, but he's been at the subject for a scandal for the remainder of his life.
But these characters can be, and they're easily manipulated by the system as scapegoats. This happens in France too.
So his image is used, and his story is, even though there's badness there, the redemptiveness in it, and the threads. Because if you read of his childhood, he's a runaway from Auschwitz essentially. His mother was killed in the gas chambers, and I don't even know what happened to his father. And this is a guy who, he lost his own virginity when he was 13, and so he's seeking some kind of connection, and it's sick. but he's in he's in a kind of culture, a Hollywood, Los Angeles 1970s culture at the time, where
Yes.
that stuff is totally hush hush and totally encouraged, and other people are doing it as well.
Experimenting.
Well, yeah. Well, so the only point being that there are other people doing Polanski-esque things as well, but they're not Polanski, and they're not labeled with the Scarlet P.
Yeah,
And
sure. Fair enough. Sure enough.
so like he
Bring
becomes
him
a
in.
vessel. He becomes a vessel for the collective outrage at Hollywood. He becomes you know
Yes,
what I mean?
a
And so
scapegoat. A scapegoat.
he becomes the scapegoat. Even though his crimes are genuine, he becomes a scapegoat because
Sure.
everyone else gets to wash their hands of doing similar things.
But
I mean,
of course.
all of the guilt lands squarely on his head.
Yes,
And
of course. There
so
is, yes. But the fact that, however, that he lends himself to become to serve as a scapegoat so easily, and so it suggests that there may be a problem with his understanding of things and with his path of life. Now,
well, when it all happened,
Socrates is used as a scapegoat, but he doesn't really lend himself to serving as one.
Well, his wife had just been murdered by the Charlie Manson gang.
Yes,
I mean, I'm just trying to paint a picture because
yes.
you seem like you'd kind of like to have him just be a cameo, and I'm trying to bring him in for more of a major part.
That's all right.
And
anyway, the metaphor of the body, that's fine. It's a recycled one. That you could go to Mons, the ancient Mencius, the ancient dialogue where the question is asked. Well, it's a parable. If and I will paraphrase it closely and faithfully, if the farmer loses his dog, he knows he lost his dog. If he lost his chicken, he knows he lost his chicken. If he loses his arm, he knows he lost his arm. But what if he loses his mind, his head, let's say? He won't know. But now,
right. Let me say one final thing about the Polanski, because the main thing, in my opinion, about Polanski or also Mel Gibson, really, is that people envy them deeply because they have far more talent, and they're far more talented than the others around them. Because this guy arrived in Hollywood, and Mel Gibson too, and they start making movies, and their movies are instant classics because they're pulling from a whole different deck of cards, and their level of talent inspires envy in all of Hollywood, and they're hated by all of Hollywood because they're envied.
Well, this is normal. I mean, it follows the norm.
Well, it's not normal. It's only normal if you have the talent that can inspire it. If you're untalented, no one envies you.
No, I am referring to the response, the mediocrity, the resentment of the mediocre.
It's certainly a normal response qua envy, but first you have to be envied.
Yes. Well, now, as far as his message is concerned, as an ancient Buddhist scripture, shall we say, dialogue scripture, has it. The mind does not see the mind. The mind does not see the mind. In other words, the mind is never its own determination. The mind is never its own determination. It can determine itself in terms of other things, but it's not the head. And
Yeah, this point was really this point was really like brought home to me when I was traveling around, because I've traveled a moderate amount in my life, more than a lot of people. But whenever I had traveled in the past, and wherever most people travel, you do so in a group usually, and so you form a little microculture around yourself, a little force field of your friends, and oftentimes people go on road trips together, best of friends, and their friendship is sorely tested, and they end up in screaming matches about who put what Coca-Cola in which cup holder or whatever. And but the only thing that can really fracture and fragment and fray when you're traveling alone is your own self. And so those bickering voices in your own head start to, and in my case at least, I observed how I was in New Orleans, and I contrasted it sharply with who I was in North Carolina and Atlanta, and how I would have been in Nashville, and how I would have been in New York City. And it's not something that really juxtaposes itself starkly to you unless you do it in a brief window of time, like I did, I think, because you have no time really to acclimate when you're only at one place for one day. And so when you're rapidly on an odyssey of that kind alone, and you have to be alone, so you're not just walking down memory lane through conversation with an old college friend or something. You start to see that different places are very different, and who you become. I think people move to different places and they change over time, but it's usually a very gradual process, because they stay in touch with their friends and they speak on the phone, or they travel with their family or with a roommate or somebody. And so a transformation will occur. And now that you're in Florida, you will probably see a whole different side of yourself, Marco. So now you're going to see the Florida Marco. And it'll probably happen somewhat gradually, because you're in touch with various people that you're remaining in touch with from before. But to the degree that you remain open to your new environment and the people who live there and are from there, you will begin to see in yourself, if you're open to it, a transformation in your identity, or if you like, yourself and who you are, and the new Marco. And
I'm not sure about this the notion of identity that is implied in your character.
That's why I shifted from identity, because that's not the right word. But my only point is that we are beings as human beings.
Yes.
With our senses, and we take in what's around us, and not just through senses, but we take in sort of all of the human elements, and all the weather, and all the people, and the place, and the way people live in a place.
Yes.
And so, like, if you live in a place like New York City, you basically have to be an asshole, like especially driving. If you don't cut people off, you'll never get where you're going to.
Well, you adapt.
You adapt, but how do you adapt? You adapt by becoming like them, and you begin to imitate. We are imitative beings, and so
look, Chris. I will be repeating myself to some extent, but as human beings, we have no alternative.
Sure.
Unless we want to become these hermits. We have no alternative but to adapt to the situation. Now, how do you adapt? Do you adapt as a sophist, or do you adapt as Socrates?
Yeah.
Socrates adapts through a kind of condiscentio, as the old Christians would put it. In other words, by lowering himself to the level of the whatever category it is, to the New York cab driver, whatever you want to call it. And his task now, he is not trying to be to take up a role that doesn't exist, a new role. He's not inventing a new role. He's taking up the others' roles.
I'm not saying you should. I'm just pointing out kind of like how the physics of personality works. Or pick a better analogy if you can think of one. But just the way we are as human beings, and the way that I feel like I have undergone some kind of transformation into a person who can do this or that voice,
Yeah.
and who can choose from sort of a second set of options of how I might be if I were to play this character or that character. Because I remember, for instance, the one time right after college, there was a girlfriend of my close friend who was going to be in a movie, an indie movie in New York City. And
Right.
there were some photos, some very professional photos, some Polish photographer took of me, a very bizarre thing. And I sent those along, and this female director of this little indie had some kind of like vegan crusade thing going with these vegan rebels who destroy a supermarket or something. And she looked at these photos and she said, "This guy is the perfect look." So I drove all the way, from Maryland at the time to New York City, and I auditioned to be my friend's girlfriend's boyfriend in the short film. And they were all very nice about it, and it was an okay experience. But I didn't get the part, and they explained to me that an actor came in who they gave the same lines to, and he said, "Okay, now here are the lines, and I'll do them for you 4 different ways." And he proceeded to give 4 distinct performances of the same audition. And I they had given me directions too, and they said I wanted more conviction, so I raised my voice and I tried to be angrier, and I mustered up my frustration, and
Yes.
but I couldn't, but I was incapable at the time of what I now would be capable of doing, and what this man was capable of doing, like that, which was to give 4 entirely distinct performances of the
That's all
same
right.
speech.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, I'm not sure where I'm going this totally. Maybe you can anchor me, but
Yes.
I'm just trying to illustrate a point about that, at least. That insofar as we are, that we have some kind of grab bag within ourselves of how we can act and how we can relate to others, and be this way with this person, that way, and mediate.
Yes.
That we don't really acquire any of that without first sort of trying on different things, and in my case, sort of traveling around, or whatever the case may be. I mean, if you're in a place like Athens or first century Jerusalem, all kinds of circus animals and carnival barkers are passing through on a regular basis. So you don't really have necessarily maybe the need to travel, because you're seeing the world pass through you. But if you're in a more of a podunk place like Pittsburgh or Steubenville, I think it is kind of necessary to get a flavor for elsewhere, because you're not going to really get it at home.
Okay. 2 points on this. What you have just said. The experience in acting. One pertains to success in the discipline, and in the other, we'll see. It is my impression that in all disciplines, especially today, to succeed in that discipline, to receive an approval, a good rating, one is we're at such a state of affairs that without, that given the establishment, one must be ready to sell his soul, and so that because the discipline is not, I mean, the establishment is keenly aware, very sensitive to that what I once called in an academic department, that little golden window open to the possibility that what we're doing is not 100% right. So, in other words, a window to truth. And in an academic setting, I was once told, and then I got in trouble because of that, because I was asking to keep that little window open. I was told that I was very optimistic. In other words, I shouldn't be asking for that little window to be kept open. If we're at some point we're faced with two alternatives, and they're not compatible anymore. That's the situation of tyranny, if you like, where either you're open to success or you seek the truth. And there you have to acknowledge that I am not going to be, I am a threat. I am a literal threat in everything I do to the majority of people.
Yeah.
To the establishment, certainly.
Mm.
If you want to look at a Catholic, a fairly recent one, who dealt with the issue of success extensively, that was Thomas Merton. He had tried to become a novelist, a writer. He failed, and he went back to it, and as if by hasard, by chance, he received certain notoriety, and not because he had sought it, but he had, it simply happened to him, and given that his autobiographical accounts. So, all right, that's. But as far as acting is concerned, again, I was going to make another point. It slipped my mind, but I think the main issue is to sort of pretend, is to act. I'm pretending to be an actor. That would be the compromise. I am acting, and I'm pretending, I'm an actor pretending to be an actor. Right. I'm a different kind of actor. And when I teach, I teach, in schools. I pretend to teach.
You pretend to be a teacher, yeah.
Right. Jacob Klein once wrote a book pretending to be a erudite intellectual.
Yeah.
He gave all of his, he noted all the dots on the I's. He crossed all of his T's, so he fit the Klan. And yet he was up to something altogether superior.
Sure.
That was not his point.
Yeah, well, I think if you do it well, you can fool a lot of people. And you, for instance, Marco, someone with your credentials, like, for instance, this video, properly edited, and maybe we'll cut out this part about acting, and acting about teaching, in case we undermine our own credibility, especially yours, since you have more of it. But take this video and somehow, ideally just let my parents and my wife find it somehow, without it seeming like I need them to see it. And if they are made subtly aware that you went to whatever university, and you notice that about Dante, and have been around Europe or what have you, my own credibility in their eyes, because I'm having a rather erudite discussion with you, and you are accepting and respectful towards me and my dilemma and understanding of it, I will instantly rise. I'll be a rising star for my parents and my wife, because they will believe the pretense. They will believe that you are a teacher and not just pretending to be a teacher.
But let me, however, suggest a point where I think you may have made a mistake.
Okay.
And if I understand your situation correctly, I think that you could be accused fairly, okay? You could be accused fairly of having underestimated the hiatus between the poet and the non-poet. Or shall I put it another way? The hiatus between the man who's open to truth and the man who has sold his soul to become his role or any given role in society.
Yeah.
There is,
Mm.
it is as if I were to say that that you have tried to be honest and to be successful in our society at the same time.
Right.
And you have sought approval from the society as an honest man.
Mm. Right.
Now I think that that's a mistake, and one could accuse you of having tried the impossible.
Right.
Laocoon, the Greek character in Homer, Laocoon has a problem. He tries to warn his fellow citizens of the truth, and nobody wants to hear it for whatever reason. And he goes to the point where he's so stubborn that the gods have to intervene and swallow him up, him and his sons up. From the sea rises the monster that we see represented in this, the famous sculpture. It's a Roman copy of a Greek original, but the famous sculpture in the Vatican. So you face it at some point. Now you can face it by becoming a sophist. You spoke about martyrdom as if it were, something you could sort of take and piecemeal. But no, martyrdom is witnessing, literally. So we are witnesses. Now the question is, what is the proper manner for a human being as such to witness the truth? And you can't escape irony. If you go straight, undiluted, and if you're seeking approval for honesty in the undiluted sense of honesty, you're not going to get it. You're just not going to have it, and they will hate you for that. How can you? It is not just your wife; it is any Xantippe. I mean, if I may dare say so, it is. You cannot be approved for being an honest man in the Cicero's sense of honestum. Yeah. That's you have to pretend to be honest in their sense, because in their sense, honest means follow the regulations and follow the rules, the protocols. That's what an honest man does. You pretend to be honest in that sense. As a painter, I pretend to be a painter. I have pretended to be a painter in the usual sense. But I have also realized that I'm not even going to bother pretending to be a painter in the most corrupt and vile sense of the day, which is right. So I'm that is open for me, the possibility of being accepted as a painter. Where I am, it is in Baroque terms, let us say, and then it is very strange. What I paint seems very strange. It is admired in some cases, but at the same time, it is at odds with the current taste, the taste that is in vogue. So it will not really sell, as they say. It is something very strange, as the Renaissance is, which is okay. The Renaissance is okay because it has the approval of the establishment. They market it, but something new that would not be marketed.
I mean, we're beginning to address all these sort of like meta levels, because
Mm-hmm.
What I'd like to say in response to that is that it's almost like when contemporary art is being sold,
Yes.
it's less that something is valued for what its value is. It's more like it's valued for the value of the story you can say about how it's valued. So when you buy something for a lot of money and you display it and you look at it and admire it, and what you're admiring really is not so much the thing itself. Well, Paul is always saying literature is the enemy of art. Literature meaning criticism or explanation.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
it's like you've got this piece of art in your house or some, one of these rich people,
No.
and what you're really valuing is you're valuing what you can say about this thing to others. You say, oh, well, don't you know this thing is valued at such and such a much, because the person who made it was doing crystal meth and teaching at Oxford at the same time, and that's his own feces, and that's actually a piece of the true cross right there that he super glued on as well.
Yes.
And you know what I mean? And so it's like the thing is not actually valuable, but you're valuing the fact that someone found, like some imaginary person, some imaginary distant entity found it valuable. And it's like a spiritual thing almost.
Well, it corroborates the discourse. It is there to confirm the greatness of the discourse. And the discourse, of course, is the discourse of flattery, the dominant discourse. Okay, sure. It's just
right. But the people who make it, like, well, you talk about selling your soul, because if you have delusions about yourself and you're saying this and that, but you don't call me by my given Christian title, but call me, Bug Man or something, and you're making this thing that everyone wants to. So you're either like in the crazy house, or you sell your soul and they take you away from the crazy house and they put you in a mansion. And it's like these. There's the story in Don Quixote, where in the latter half, where he and Sancho Panza are taken in by the Duke and the Duchess, and they're indulging every last fantasy of Don Quixote, and making him play out this big comedy for all their guests, and keeping him as sort of a house trained loony.
yes.
And it's for their entertainment, and it's to run interference. Really, it's a form of concealment. It's a way to distract everybody from their crimes, which are far more direct and humdrum and far more vicious. But they can point and say, oh, don't look at us. Don't look at what the Duke and the Duchess are doing behind closed doors. When the police chief is snoozing at his desk. No. Look at this wacko, and look at who he thinks he is. And so it's the archetype of the fool, more or less. It's the fool who knows the truth, sort of, kind of, but is wrapped up in this game of flattery, and is kept as sort of the way you would put like a fierce lion in an electric leash or something. Mm-hmm. That he's wild, sure. You don't let him loose. He's a danger. He's a poet. But what you do is you keep him as a house pet, and you put him in the courtyard when all the doors are locked and caged, and it's bred in circuses. Like, there's the lion, mm-hmm. there's the Christians, let's have them devour them, mm-hmm. and mm-hmm. the Colosseum.
Yes. Well, you mentioned the king's fool, but in fact, this is an intriguing aspect of his role, which suggests that when the king is looking at this fool, he is somehow exorcising a folly, or rather, the good folly. He is telling himself, you see, if I were not a king, I would be a king's fool.
Right.
So what does it mean not to be the role? It would be to be completely insane.
Right.
Without redemption. So the divine folly is automatically exorcised.
Right.
What the hell?
Right. So it's not just right. So it's not just concealing his folly from others; it's concealing it from himself as well, because he's saying, "Oh well, yeah." well, yeah, if I were not, if I let my people know my sins and I got honest and became a man of truth and veritas, well, just look,
Yes,
right
look,
at him.
yeah, there it is. Hop Frog is right there.
He's patting his own back. He's soothing his own conscience. Yeah, he's soothing his, and the more contorted and bizarre and weird and flat out disgusting and repugnant that contemporary art becomes, like I said before, you can tell what is being hidden by how it is being hidden.
Yes, yes.
So when you're seeing that it's necessary for that extent of corruption and perversity to conceal something, then that gives you a pretty big hint about what is being concealed.
Yeah. Hey, it's big. It's big. There's it's a huge. It is perceived as a huge threat, and so much so that one does not dare even speak about it. Of course, as a threat.
Right.
We
Right.
can go on pretending as if there were no threat.
Right, and safer that way.
There is nothing. No, you know it is.
Yeah.
It is as the.
Of course not.
I recall when in my early youth, I was in Italy and there was a news broadcast, and the journalists went to a town in Sicily where they had just murdered a few people, and right there in the square, and there were large uh, puddles of blood uh, right there in the street, and right in front of the sidewalk where there was a barber shop. And so the journalist goes up to the barber shop, uh, which stood right in front of the place where they had just murdered these people, the mafia. And he asked the barber, "Sir, could you tell us something about the mafia here? I mean, is it something that really disturbs your daily life and so forth?" And the guy answers, "The what? The mafia? There is no mafia here. There is no mafia. What are you talking about?" What?
Yeah. Why did the chicken cross the road? Answer. What chicken?
What chicken? What chicken?
Hey,
No,
what chicken?
no. There's no mafia here. What are you talking about? Go somewhere else. And Stalin,
The chicken?
yeah. And
Yeah.
Joseph Stalin, of course, tells people that as long as his counselor, that as long as nobody's complaining, that must mean that there's no problem. So, okay, we find ourselves in that situation. The reminder that there just might be an alternative, that there might be a problem, is
To what extent is this conversation that I'm now becoming a part of that is priorly happening with you and Paul, and before that, to what extent is this whole conversation going, making itself known, and in what ways? Because this is a conversation that occurs to me. It's a thought I had before, but now I'm having much more. This is a conversation that is not just remaining between us.
yes,
But this conversation is going out, and who knows, in what way it goes out. And with ears to hear shall hear. But do you have any? Maybe this would be a kind of a natural off ramp because I do want to have some lunch. But to what extent do you feel this conversation? Well, just how do you think about it? Where did it come from? Where's it going? Any notable, quotable parts of this whole, not just this between me and you, but you and Paul and beforehand and so
on. Now, of course, we have been recording,
right,
in more than one sense, these conversations online. There are traces. They're there, so we'll see for how long they will be kept there. But they're also, and they will stand as an invitation, perhaps more explicitly in the future, an invitation for others who partake in awareness of these problems to join in the conversation and perhaps even to participate eventually in the establishment, as we have spoken of briefly, of perhaps of a kind of academy, in that is dedicated to to speak with the founding fathers, to that proposition, um, to that proposition that a man who is not um, opening up his society to truth is not a man who will ever be happy. So yes, an academy that invites, a center of study that invites, that promotes that logos, that word, that discourse, that opens up our lives and that saves our lives ultimately from this decaying into roles, determined and in fact managed by tyrants. If we want to escape that predicament, I think that a center of study, a kind of community of dialogue of that sort, would be a blessing for all, including for the society at his, whether it knows it or not.
Well, yeah.